Gender conversation is one so important that it requires not just one voice, but every voice. Enough is Enough Nigeria partnered with Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center, Ward C, Women Radio 91.7, WFM, and YTV to host the gender conversations with First Ladies from each of Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones. Her Excellency Anna Darius Ishaku, Taraba State, Bisi Fayemi, Ekiti State, Choma Uzodinma from Imo State, Olufolake Abdulrazak, Kwara State, Zainab Shinkafi Bagudu, Kebbi State. All the First Ladies spoke on topics like what a gender-just Nigeria would look like and actions to ensure a gender-just Nigeria. This conversation was hosted by Bolanle Ulukoni on the International Day of the Girl Child.
I'm going to be talking to the First Lady today of Akwa Ibom, and she so graciously agreed to have a conversation with me about the work that she's been doing, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. When you think of a gender-just society, what does that mean to you? You know, when I say a society that is gender-just, what does that mean to you?
Simply means women inclusion in all affairs of life.
Right.
Political sector, decision making, society, bodies, women should be included. Mm-hmm. Recently, we've been glamoring, even the United Nations talking about gender parity.
Yeah. Women
are known to be stabilizers. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about gender justice, simply means inclusion of women in all aspects.
I can see that you're extremely passionate and it's very dear to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really encouraging for so many of us who sometimes it just feels like we're like, what is happening? How can we move forward? But I want to talk about law enforcement and how can we encourage people to report cases of rape? Because that's still something that there's a lot of shame attached to it. A lot of people feel, wow, was it my fault? Did I do something? You know, and a lot of people will also say, if you report, nobody will marry you, especially if it's a girl that's older. How can we let people understand that this thing needs to be reported? The people have to be held accountable.
The campaign of breaking silence is going on also. That's why we are having so many reported cases.
Right.
Before now, if we were not embarking on the campaigns, people would just be raped. We wouldn't know that people have been raped. But because we've talked about it, we've told parents, we've told women, we've told even the victim, young girls, when you are raped, don't keep silence. Don't be threatened. Because most of them will be threatened. I will kill you if you make any reports. I will wipe away your family. And because of that, especially those indigent families will retrieve, will not want to say anything because they don't want to be harassed. Then we have told them, anybody, when your child is raped and you are threatened, report to us. We had a case like that. This poor man reported the case and the family of the offender went to harass the man. He came back to us. We moved with full force. My NGO, FEREP, FIDA, NAWOJ, Ministry of Women Affairs, we went to the village. We went and reported to the village head, brought the family of the offender, made him to sign an undertaking. If anything happened to this family,
yes.
Since that day, they stopped harassing the parents of the victim. So we've been talking about this. Don't allow them to victimize you by threatening you. Some parents will not even want to report when they are offered money.
Yes.
Part of the campaign, we are saying, if your child is raped and you report in the first instance, then coming back, trying to follow up the case, you try to play pranks with us, you go in for it. We've issued that threat to them. Don't obstruct us. You are not the one that is being raped. Yes. That child needs justice.
We all kind of have an assumption that, it has to do with the fact that people were at home, people were idle. But I want to hear your thoughts on it. Why do you think there was such a spike in gender-based violence during COVID?
I am one person that does not believe that there is any justification for such an act.
Yeah.
staying at home, everybody was staying at home. Why would you be the one to go and perpetuate this kind of crime? So there's no justification whatsoever. It's just people that, I don't know how, it's not even about God. I think these people are people that don't have conscience. Let me put it that way. They don't have conscience. Their conscience are dead, because I cannot imagine an old man defiling a young child. So there's no justification to this act at all.
What would a gender just Nigeria look like to you?
A gender just Nigeria to me would mean that all Nigerian women would have equality of opportunity. It would mean that women would have access to education, to training, and basic resources.
Right.
It would mean that women have an equal say in decision making, that we would have up to 50% of women in leadership and governance. And if we can't get the 50%, at least let us have the minimum of 35% as recommended in the Beijing Platform for Action. Right. A gender-just Nigeria, as far as I'm concerned, would be a place where women have access to healthcare and the full gamut of sexual and reproductive rights. It would mean that no woman would die giving birth to a child. And it would also mean a country where women are able to live their lives in dignity and respect, where no woman or girl would be afraid that within her home and outside of her home, she's going to be violated. And worse still, that if she experiences a violation, that a culture of impunity will continue to make sure that she does not get justice. So I want to say in Nigeria, where women are regarded as full citizens and full human beings, and not second-class citizens.
We have such a pushback when it comes to ensuring that women do have equal rights. And because we're not asking for anything special, we're not asking for anything miraculous. We're asking, I should have the right to go to school. I should have the right to good health care. I should have the right to say, no, I don't want to get married at this age. Where does the pushback come from in our society, and why is there such a hindrance to having conversations around women's rights?
Bolanle, the pushback comes from patriarchy. We live in societies that are deeply patriarchal, and all the systems that are responsible for our socialization, our political systems, our economic systems, social systems, cultural systems, religious systems, all these systems are deeply embedded in patriarchal norms and values, male-dominated, and they also have a way of co-opting women as, custodians of these norms and values. So you see a lot of women also going out there. Some people call them patriarchal princesses.
Yes.
Going out there and enforcing these patriarchal norms and values on the rest of, on women as a whole. So I believe that for those of us who are part of the women's movement, or for those of us who call ourselves feminists, I define feminism as a global struggle against all forms of patriarchal oppression. So as a feminist, I believe that my task is to understand what I'm up against, to understand this system, to understand how it plays itself out, and then to figure out ways in which we can dismantle these patriarchal roadblocks. And if they can't be dismantled for one reason or the other, at least find ways of interrogating them and ensuring that they don't continue to mean business as usual. So that's why we are saying, for example, if we have laws in place to protect women from gender-based violence, to ensure that women have equal access to policy making and governance, then these laws would, ensure that we have these rights. And and that we move away from doing business as usual. That's the way things have always been. Or, as I said, as I was growing up, hearing things like women don't have a choice. When we have certain laws and frameworks in place, that's a start. Now women would know that they do have choices.
Seen a lot that's happened in the last few weeks in Nigeria, and I know Ekiti has been at the forefront in passing a lot of important laws. So I want to talk a little bit about, the role that the government has played, and also just you as an advocate for women has played in making sure that when it comes to issues that has to do with gender-based violence, there's progress.
Yes, thanks, Bolanle. Well, one of the first things I did during what we call the JKF1 period, the first term of His Excellency, our governor, was to ensure that we have legal and policy frameworks in place,
right,
which will ensure that we can address the full range of women's rights issues. One of the first things we actually instigate the national gender policy.
okay.
The national gender policy was put in place in 2005 and revised in 2015. And it's meant to be a policy roadmap for state governments to then use for their own gender mainstreaming work and ensure that women's development issues and women's issues with regards to politics, the economy, social issues, and so on are addressed. Now, Ekiti State is the first state in Nigeria to have domesticated the national gender policy in October 2011. Because I figured that if we can have that policy in place, then we no longer have to keep begging the government to do certain things when it comes to women's rights issues. Following on the heels of that, we have the Gender-Based Violence Prohibition Law of 2011, which was specifically around gender-based violence. And then in 2013, we passed the Gender and Equal Opportunities Law. Now, and then of course, 2013 as well, we also had the sex offenders register. So we're actually the first in the country to open a sex offenders register.
There's, in so many ways, people hope that there's a first lady will be there to really be a stirring for the governor or whichever position, whether it's president, and kind of just shedding light on a lot of issues that have to do with women's rights. What's your take on that, and how do you plan on navigating your, role as the First Lady?
Okay, for now, I've been looking at what my predecessors have done, and the positive things they've done, and I'm looking at continuity, and also I've been consulting with the relevant stakeholders in my state.
Okay.
And I don't just want to start a project for project's sake.
Right.
I want to do something. I want to leave. I want to have an impact. I want to leave footprints. But basically, I'm going to focus on maternal and newborn death rates, amongst others. There are a couple of things I want to do, but let's just leave it at the maternal and newborn death rates and all.
Right. And in so many ways, the question is, how do you govern people in this context and in this day and age, especially with technology and social media? For example, I know that, a few weeks ago, you had a protest in Imo State that had to do with the issue of rape and gender-based violence. So tell us a little bit about that, please.
Okay, so in Imo State now, first off, I would appreciate the governors for the state of emergency on gender-based violence. And in Imo State, we are working on domesticating the VAPP Act. The House of Assembly has been shut down for a while, so once they resume, we will start working on that. And the Child's Right Act has been domesticated by the past administration, and I applaud them for that. And some organizations have come together in Imo to form a committee on ending violence against women and girls. And some of these organizations are the Ministry of Gender and Vulnerable Persons in Imo State, the Alliances for Africa, Child Protection Network, National Human Rights Commission, FIDA, the media, the National Orientation Agency, the National Council for Women, police, public relations officers, the Ndiezes representing the 3 zones in Imo State, the Girls Guide, Hausa Community, Noble Ladies, and other civil society organizations in Imo State. So together we organized the march that held on the 17th of June against rape and gender-based violence. So And then the Nigerian Governors Wives Forum, we've had 2 meetings, and we've agreed that we'll meet every other month to talk about this whole matter. And we have an action plan, which I'm sure the other first ladies who have come to speak before spoke about it. So that's it.
I know that we always talk a little bit about the power of social media when it comes to pushing a lot of agendas that has to do with, you know, women's rights and women issues. How important do you think it is to kind of teach women's rights in schools to younger girls? Do you think that do we need that?
It is very, very important. That's one of the action plans we in the Governors Wives Forum have come up with, because we need to teach our young boys, we need to teach our young girls, you know. It starts from primary school, you know. We plan on going out to the schools, talking to them, you know, having a safe place for them to come out and let us know this is what is going on, you know. Speaking to people, not to judge like these victims, you know. Having a safe place so they can come up and speak and say, you know, whenever these things happen, you know. So so basically, education is very important. We're also working on rape kits in schools, healthcare, communities. So when these things happen, you don't just go home. You either use a rape care kit or you go straight to the healthcare, you know, for you go straight to the hospitals.
My name is Balali Olukani. I had a conversation with the First Lady of Kebbi State, Dr. Zainab Shinkafi Bagudu. And the conversation we had was on gender-based violence in the North, and specifically talking about, you know, Kebbi State. And it was really an eye-opening and robust conversation.
We talk about child marriage more than we talk about the rights of women in Islam. So we have to help ourselves to propagate these kind of conversations. So these are the way in which I do my gentle advocacy. We have people that help us to about it. We have help us. Some of them are women, some of them are men, but most of our allies thankfully are people that matter. We have a lot of very good members of the civil society, in government, out of government. It's going very well. To go back to your initial question, the advocacy is really going well. We have had 4 years of, I'd say, stagnation. The unfortunate deaths of these 2 ladies and the whole conversation in the whole country and globally that has started now, I know that we're going to see a huge amount of change, and things are going to indeed move forward, not just in northern Nigeria, but in Nigeria. In Kebbi, for instance, which will answer another part of your question, there are 2 laws, 2 basic laws, the Child Right Act and the VAP Act. And then there's also what is known as the Penal Code, which the 19 northern states have. However, this code has to be amended, or it has been amended. There was a committee led by His Excellency the Governor of Sokoto State and the former Governor of Bauchi State, and they've done a lot of work on it, and some states have adopted it. Basically, what the penal code, the confusion with the penal code is that in law you cannot have the same crime you can't have the same crime with different penalties. So we can't have the VAP Act and then we have the penal code for violence, for instance. If states adopt the VAP Act and the penal code is still there, it has to be merged. It's going to cause confusion I'm sure there are lawyers amongst you that can explain this better. There's a section in northern Nigeria, and if you go to court, it's going to cause confusion for the lawyers and the courts. Under which one are you going to try him? And which penalty are you going to use? And it can be used mischievously. There were some laws whereby, in fact, it's even beyond things like rape and violence. We have others like kidnapping. You know, we had crimes like kidnapping where right till now, as I speak to you, a judge in Kebbi can grant bail to a kidnapper because we have not adopted the amended penal code. And this is a very serious matter, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about the VAP and the Child Right Act for 5 years. So these are things that all this has brought to the forefront, and we need to do, and we are doing now as a result of the agitation. So social media is good for that. Having said that, there are 200 million Nigerians. There's only 20 million of you on social media, of you. But the main problem is in those 180 million Nigerians that we're not reaching in the grassroots. And that is where the problem lies. It is those people. You're educated. I'm not saying that I'm not saying it doesn't happen and gang rapes don't happen amongst the educated. It does. But the most heinous ones and the most ridiculous ones, 3 months old being raped, is happening in that 180 million group. That is where the issues are. That's right from there, getting it into our curriculum, getting our imams to converse about this, to know what is right, what the Quran actually says, what the Bible actually says, what it doesn't say, what the traditional rulers say. And these are the people that everybody listens to. They don't listen to me if I don't go through these people. You know, they don't listen to everyone. They don't listen to the president if we don't go through these people. They might love him. They might love the law. These laws we're pushing to have them domesticated. We're pushing to have them because we're living in 2020, and it is the civil thing to do, and we must have a society with laws.
You know, I this is kind of a great segue into the conversation that we're going to be having today. We're talking about gender justice and how can we ensure that, specifically in your state, the women, the youth, the girls are empowered. What would a gender just community and society look like for you?
Okay, first of all, to get into that, I think we should first of all acknowledge today as the Day of the African Child. And the theme is actually very interesting because it says friendly justice for the African child. So obviously the African child includes a lot of women, a lot of girls. So we're looking at justice for girls as well as, as well as for boys. So that leads us into the gender just, scenario. It's important that in any planning of any country, you take the gender roles very seriously. The planning, you need to plan for girls and plan long-term for them to be viable partners in the society. Because, when you have half of your society not well taken care of, not well educated, not putting in their best or not being allowed to put in their best, obviously society is limping on because, you can't, we put so much onto the men to achieve. And sometimes there are a lot of women who are so astute, who are so brilliant, and it's important to be able to nurture them so that they feel that they can achieve anything in this world, and that's leaning towards a gender just society whereby, we're not saying that everybody, you're not trying to be like a man, you're trying to achieve your own potential. And in that regard, I think, the leanings that women put on certain jobs should be recognized. The fact that they're better at certain things, should also be recognized. And that way, you have a more robust society where things are working for most people, not that things are not working for everyone. When they say you educate a woman, you educate a nation. You can't, that is so important. Women primarily are the carers in the home, and when you look at a woman, you expect that she's able to impart a lot of things onto the children. So, you want a woman who can, I think if I were a man, I would want a woman who would be able to bring up my children in a way and manner that I would, that I would be proud of, as well as whatever I do in addition. So, you know, certain things women do a lot better, and certain things we do as equally as good as men. And therefore, you know, I think that should be recognized. And if we do that, you see that society moves on a lot better. We put so much pressure on men to do so many different things. And the women, you don't put as much emphasis on them achieving things. And that impacts on society, really. So a gender-just world is a world where a woman feels that she can achieve her potential, her true potential, can get to the top of her career, you know, and be justly rewarded, can do everything, you know, that a man can do and possibly better.
How can we communicate effectively this idea of removing stigma so that there can be a lot more freedom, and you know, you can see a lot more people reporting crimes that have to do with gender-based violence?
Yes. So this is the only way, you know, people have to report it. It has to be taken up. It has to go all the way to the judiciary. People have to be convicted. A lot of governors now have, you know, it's a crime now. So apart from the child right law, you also have the you know, Violence Against Prohibition Act, the PAPP Act, and you know, all these are just meant to make sure that justice is served.
What's the experience like when you're talking to young girls and women about empowerment and this idea that their lives doesn't have to be about just being, you know, a homemaker? They can do something alongside that if they choose to.
Yeah, well, you know, you talked about young women and people in Lagos generally always being on a hustle. You know, in Kwara, the women, wow, they are very entrepreneurial. They're in one small business or the other. I work very closely with all the small businesses, the SMEs, and a lot of them are women. So it's more skills acquisition rather than just giving them gifts or money or things like that to go start a business. Because what we realized is that sometimes when you just give them tools and things like that, they could sell them off and try to, you know, live by that. And once they've done that, in a couple of weeks again, they're back in the poverty cycle all over again.
Right.
So it's important to train them in certain skills. Then when they've got that training, then you can give them the tools. And then you find that that is sustainable. So it sustains them in that business.
But I wanted to find out, what's the general feedback that you've heard from community members in regards to really talking about the issue of rape? Because in so many ways, based on what part of the country you are, there are different, you know, conceptions and also misconceptions about what is consent, what is not consent. So I wanted to find out what, you know, the feedback has been in Taraba State.
It's very interesting. Yesterday I had a meeting, training session actually, because we are trying to veer into sheltering of vulnerable youths, orphans, and the like. So we usually, whatever it is we are trying to do, we try to get educated so that we'll be able to handle it properly. So one of those who were commenting raised the issue of incidentally a male asking us why we think rape is going on. So I asked him to also answer his question, but of course he wouldn't. Now, some of the things we found out was also culture-based. Culture-based in that a woman is brought, a woman starts her childhood as a non-important member of the family.
Right.
She is a house help to her brothers. She is a cook, assistant cook to her mother, where you can use all the children, male and female, but everybody in the family uses girl child for housework, domestic work. In fact, she even takes food to her junior brothers, serves them food, brings water to wash hands. So, you know, and so how do you bring up a woman to feel she is worth something?
Right.
If right from her family background, she's brought up to feel that she is less important than the boys.
You know, I always tell people that rape has to do with women's rights. And women's rights is something that a lot of men, a lot of even women don't want to hear, because we consider us a traditional society. And there's this need to hold on to our tradition. We don't want to adopt the traditions of the West. So is there a middle ground? Is there a place where, because sometimes if you're having a conversation, we need to make sure that we're communicating, we're not just shouting. And I find my generation, we sometimes might not be having a conversation when it comes to this issue. Is there a way to have this conversation?
Well, like I said, we need to go around. We need to meet communities. Maybe like what we normally do in all this sensitization of communities. We meet traditional leaders and stakeholders, especially women. It depends on what we want. Sometimes we mix them, sometimes it's, you know, maybe just, but I will give you an example with what happened when we were doing the drug sensitization. Some women were asking us what we expected their children to do. They go to school, they come back, the government doesn't give them jobs. So what do we expect the children to do? So I had to ask her whether taking drugs is the answer to lack of employment opportunities.
Right.
So, you know, there are so many things that they are completely misconstrued. Actually, left to people, they will imagine that it is the government that ought to look after their babies. There are communities where they have children without stop, without number, without bothering. And what happened? They sell these children. And right now we have 72 we are looking after. So we are still talking, actually, truly. We are talking, we are going to invite other stakeholders for a meeting next week. We are going to discuss it to see how we can collaborate within ourselves and then with the outer society.